So I'm going to go through the answers for your small groups, Mark and Matt tonight, and Tom on Thursday. The church irreplaceable. I thought this was a great sermon, and it really gets at the heart of the mission statement that we have for Haven, that we would love one another, that we would love God and love others, and so that we understand that doing this life alone is not an option. And so the first question informed the mind. What I was trying to get at is helping other people to see that all of those one another's are vitally important. I would say that the greatest one, and you could probably make an argument for another one, but I wrote down in my answers that the greatest of the one another's is to love one another. All of the one another's flow from this point of view. And I think that's why I included Matthew 22 in our mission statement is, and you could even, as you talk to your small groups, as you lead your discussion, you could even go back to our mission statement and help people to see that what we're doing in small group is the most clear representation of our mission statement. And I'll talk later in the last question about how we move our feet and allow this to be worked out in our lives. It includes what we're doing in our mutual ministry time in small groups. I wrote this down. It's not hard to love one another if we'll just trust God more than we trust ourselves or our friends to not hurt us. In our small groups, many of the men are staying on the surface, and they do not trust the guys to help, but merely expect them to be judging them. This will keep them at a distance, so they won't get the help that they need to fight for freedom from sin. So if I don't allow someone in, I said this during the summer, you can't get close enough to hurt me, to actually hurt me, to judge me, to condemn me, to gossip about me. You can't hurt me. But when we keep our friends, whether they're men or women, that distance from us, they can never get close enough to really help us. And we cannot love one another if we don't know one another, like really know each other. A lot of us, we create this false image of the person we want other people to think we are, but that person doesn't need the same help that we need. And so other people are looking at that other person that you've created, this projected image of yourself, and that person doesn't need help. That person's fine. The real person inside is the one that needs help, and you're not allowing us to see that person. The next question, what is the mystery that Paul refers to in Ephesians 3:1 through 6? The mystery is that Gentiles are fellow heirs. And it seems like, well, so what? It's like, yeah, but we're Christians. We're pagans. We were the ones that were brought in. And so when you have an inheritance, and it's, let's say your inheritance is $1 million, and then daddy lets another 1 million people in, if you think of it this way, you've just diluted your inheritance. And that's not true. The fact that we were brought in to the family by the Father through the Son and have an inheritance with the nation of Israel does not dilute anyone's inheritance, because God owns it all. And so our inheritance is safe, it's sure, along with the inheritance of the nation of Israel. And that's the mystery, is that God is powerful enough and loving enough to not only choose Israel, the smallest of nations, but to choose us and put us together. And that goes to kind of our next question. When the Jews are still miserable waiting for Jesus to come, And the mystery of the church is that the church is gathering together the Jews and the Gentiles who recognize and worship in spirit and in truth, according to John 4, Jesus, the promised Messiah. And that's the mystery. We'll see that Paul refers to the mystery again when he talks about marriage in Ephesians 5. And so it's not just one mystery. There are many mysteries in the gospel. And so it's not just one mystery. Make sure your people understand that. It's not just one mystery. There are many mysteries that the gospel portends for us if we have eyes to see and ears to hear and understand. So the next question, captivate the affections. I gave you that math problem. The answer is, the rule is multiply by 15. And the rule, what goes in to this blender is the nation of Israel, the Jews, a whole bunch of angst and doubt and fear and suspicion, and all the pagan Christians. Well, they're not pagan Christians, they're Christ followers. And the Jews were looking for the Messiah. So God put all of that together. And then the output, what comes out of that, if the rule is changed or transformed by God, then the output is the church. So when you throw Jews and Gentiles and angst and doubt, you throw all that stuff together and put the lid on and blend it up, what comes out is the church. And so that's what we've got, and that's what we experience if we'll allow ourselves to experience it. In your lifetime, what has been the greatest failure? And I talk about a failure of church leadership when a staff member of a church that I belonged to and worked for had to address the pain of a staff member sexually abusing one of the students in the student ministry, and the pain of how that family was treated, how they were viewed, what the church did in an effort to kind of maintain kind of a silence around the family. I think that they did as good a job as I've seen any church do. But one of the things that I was able to see is that behind the scenes, sort of the attitude towards the parents of the child who was the victim. And I can't imagine the pain that they were going through. And they handled the matter with the staff member really well, and were integral in getting the police involved and shutting him down. And he was fired, let go. But the impact on the family and kind of behind the scenes, it kind of makes me mad. I don't need to go into a whole bunch of detail, but it just made me mad. And I'll tell you what, the church fails because the church is made up of sinners. And so we can sit back and we can cast stones, but as we talk in our small groups about church failures, we have to say, oh, but apart from the grace of God, I could do the exact same thing. Get fearful, respond poorly, gossip. All of those things we're potentially able to do because of our own sin. So we have to be aware of the fact that the church is broken is because there's broken people in it. If you think you want to attend the perfect church, don't attend it, because as soon as you walk through the doors, it won't be perfect anymore. And that's the place where we need to get, is to see that the church is failed, but the church is made up of humans who are in need of a Savior. And then the last question for Move the Will. When Pastor Mark was preaching, I thought of this hymn because we have to persevere with one another, and we are prone to wander. And Mark's example in the sermon was of him like wanting to get away from God, that God was convicting him of some things, and everything in him wanted to push away from intimacy with God and to get away. And he needed his brothers to help pull him back towards God. And to stay tethered to Christ is, hear me, I believe, and I believe this is what Mark preached, is the battle of the Christian life, is to stay tethered to the one we're tethered to. And it seems like oxymoronic, but we need our brothers and sisters in our small groups, in our church, at Haven, to help us to stay tethered to Christ. And the old-fashioned word that the hymn uses is fetters. And those are like manacles on our wrists or leg irons that hold us as a prisoner to Christ. And there is a freedom that being tethered or chained to Christ, that tethering, that chaining to Christ gives us freedom that we can't experience any other way. And so what we have to do is continue to fight to walk in obedience to Christ, and we need our small group brothers and sisters to help us to do that. I said that I would refer to the last question. I wrote this down in response. We have to see the guys in our lives, the women in our small groups, as God's means of grace for staying tethered to Christ. The others in our lives are not an obstacle to this, but an invaluable gift for this purpose. Listen, I do not know how you've been hurt in the past. The ways that you've tried to share embarrassing things or dark secrets, and others judged you or condemned you or gossiped about you. But I do know this, that you will need to begin to share those things with your small groups so that you can replace those negative memories of being hurt by being vulnerable with a new experience of being helped. And until you have that new experience, you will continue to pull yourself away and stay on the surface. Small group leaders, you are absolutely integral in this. If you are not going to go deep and share what's really going on in your life, and apprentices, if you're not willing to share the difficulties that you yourself are going through or your family is going through, others in your group will take the key from you and say, this is not a safe place. I'm going to stay on the surface too. And we will never be able to know one another. And I think that the type of church that Mark wants to build, that will go out into the community and actually serve vulnerable people, is going to require small groups that are vulnerable. We won't be vulnerable in safe small groups, we won't be vulnerable out in the community if we can't be vulnerable inside of our small groups. And so that's our lesson for this week. I hope that your small group discussions are rich and vital. And if you have questions, please text me or email me. I'd love to be able to answer them. And hopefully this video answers your questions about why these questions this week. Have a great day.